Disruptors and curious minds. Why do some people always seem to make good decisions when in the moments that matter? Financially, romantically, economically, professionally, whereas others make bad decision after bad decision, compounding their bad decision. It's not luck, it's down to clear thinking. And today we're going to be discussing the strategies that good clear thinkers use to get better. Welcome to Thinking on Paper. This is Book Club. I'm Mark. This is Jeremy. And today we're joined by Charlie Graham, curious mind, reader, creative strategist, currently running, get this right, Volume 8 is how you pronounce it, a talented team building custom tech solutions for Web 2 and Web 3. So welcome. And because this is Book Club, Charlie, and the first rule of Book Club, if this is your first book club, you have to speak. So perhaps you could introduce clear thinking. What was it about this book particularly that brought you to the Thinking on Paper book club?
So this is one of my favorite recent finds, and it's not that it's a recent book, but there's a lot of just crazy things happening in the world right now, economy, financial, otherwise, and so it gets really difficult, I think, to see through all the noise and find the signal. And one of my practices is always working on having the ability to think clearly, to make good decisions. And, so to sharpen that sword, I came across this book and I love it. And so when I heard you were going to cover it, there it is. So when I heard you were going to cover it, I said, yeah, I'm down. Let's do it. Let's do something different. Let's step outside of our comfort zone, not be complacent, and talk books because I love reading. So yeah, if
Then
you
you're in
want,
the right place.
I love it here. Yeah, it's great.
Jeremy, I could have highlighted the whole of the first part. I didn't. I had to resist the temptation. What was your first take? Chapter 1. Hit us with it.
Well, my first take was this is something you guys are going to get to know about me sooner than later. I freaking hate book jackets. So the first thing that I did was I removed the book jacket.
You bought hardback.
Wow. That was the only choice that I had, I guess, when I put it in. But yeah, I removed the book jacket. It's more noise than signal for me, Charlie. So I had to get that out of the way first. One of the big things that stood out to me about this book, and it's so aligned with this. So this program that I run called Right to Know You is one of the first principles that I teach when I run that program is the idea of holding space. And we're always just running and gunning and thinking we have to make all these decisions super fast and there's no time to think. Where the first piece of this chapter was like, hey, you got to hold space to think, right? So let's figure out how to do that first. And then the thinking part kind of comes later. So that was my initial takeaway, that holding space is a very important mechanic to be able to think clearly.
How did you think about holding space, Charlie? Do you mean just quiet time?
So yeah, the book with at least the first part, it's not just space, it's position, right? So it's where are you positioned? How are you positioning yourself? And are you holding space so that you can think clearly? What I really like about this book is it's all of the critical lessons you get in like metaphysical and spiritual lessons, and like gurus will tell you, get rid of the ego and know thyself. But it's laid out in a very logical way, in a very thoughtful way, where it's like, look, if you want to think clearly, the big premise in part one is you have to know your natural biological responses, acknowledge them, and make space where they don't step in before you can think. And know those moments where, biological responses actually make sense versus the moments where you should be like, nope, hold on a second. Let me make some space and think about this. So that's really like, I think the crux of the approach that's laid out in this book, at least in part one.
And also kind of saying, hey, we're humans. These are biologically ingrained into us, right? And he phrased it as being hijacked by our biology, which I think is interesting. And like, how do you guys think about? Do you guys feel these things like throughout your day, like these three kind of needs, right? Our need to defend our territory, right, is one. Our usage of hierarchies to organize and understand the world, self-preservation, like all of these things. Like, what do you ever notice yourself going into one of those spaces or being driven by one of those thought mechanics? And if so, what do you do to change it?
Every 10 minutes.
Mm.
On the hierarchy thing, so I've already learned something from chapter 1 because I did this the other day with my son, and it literally was like in the book where it ends up with the parent going, because I said so, or because you're 5. And at the moment I said it, I thought, hold on, I just read I'm just imposing my hierarchical status on him. So okay, I'm going to stop doing that more. So that's something to be aware of, and I think a lot of this is about being aware. Shane Parrish, for those who don't know, he hosts the Knowledge Project, and one of the big things I learned from that is this idea of when you're in a situation and it gets heated, or you disagree with somebody, or there is a moment where your ego comes into play, and these biological impulses that you speak of. If in that situation you had somebody who could just tap you on your shoulder and go, "Hey, Mark. Hey, Jeremy. Hey, Charlie. Like, this situation matters. It's small, but it matters," and you would react and behave totally differently because there's that sense of presence, and whereas you can override your biological, not your biological clock, your biology. But
That's
for
a
me, the big one
different
was,
episode there. Yeah.
yeah, the knowledge thing about a little knowledge is dangerous, and we all live and work in a world where people brandish small amounts of knowledge as experts, and I'm guilty of that. And that's how do I deal with it? Slowly, trying to get better at it, being aware of my limitations, reading books like this.
Let's unpack something you said there, because we're all parents, and I would love to get your thoughts on this. Is I landed on, because I can't always, unfortunately, I'm getting way better at it than I used to be, but I can't always kind of control those moments where ego or hierarchies or something take over. But I created a rule for myself that basically said, hey, I'm always going to be the first to go back when I'm wrong. So if I, blow up at my kids and I yell at them, like, as soon as I come, I go right back in there and I say, hey guys, I was wrong. I should not have reacted that way. Here's what I wanted to discuss, or that sort of thing. And it's hard to do. Like, when you first do it, you're like, damn, that's really hard to admit you're wrong. But man, every time I do it, it helps me recognize to not do it before. Do you guys have any, Charlie, do you have any rules like that, or any kind of things that you've put in place that work from an ego management perspective?
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. I mean, you've got to correct it quick. If you can't stop it in the moment, you've got to be able to course correct and let your kids know, like, that's not a proper response or reaction, if you will. So I do the same thing. I mean, we're all prone to overreact, and the programming of our biology is so strong. It really is. It's a very difficult thing, even with constant awareness. Sometimes you're not going to do it. So don't beat yourself up over it. Just correct the mistake, and then that'll cement in yourself the practice of avoiding that. One of the things in the book that he says is kind of profound, and it's something that I've adopted. I actually wrote a post about this not too long ago, but he says the best in the world know they must avoid losing before they can win. And this is metaphorical, figurative in so many ways, because it's like, okay, if you allow your biology to cause you to react, to get angry, or have something for your kids or otherwise, you just lost, right? So the whole mindset, I think, is to avoid losing by not doing that. So don't do that. Don't lose, so that you can win, so that you can be better. And it echoes throughout pretty much everything we do. But causing, like trying not to have that reaction, adopting that mindset of, okay, let me not lose here by overreacting, I think is a first good response and something that we can train ourselves on. So I've been working on that, but I'll let you know how it goes.
I love that. I love that.
Just another book for people who are watching it.
That's
It's
a
That's a
great
good
one.
one too.
which
Yeah.
is a good, I think, Ego's
It's
Enemy by Ryan Holiday.
ego is tricky, man, because some of the people who you would think are like egoless are probably the most egotistic people you'll meet. And they've deceived themselves into, you know, appearing egoless, but they're driven almost entirely by ego. It really is a tricky one, in my experience.
I was going to say, could you give us an example? Name names.
Nope.
Nope.
What you mentioned a profound quote. One of my profound moments was page 14. No one tries to win the moment at the expense of the decade, and yet that is often how it goes. To really hammer home the importance of these kind of ordinary moments where all of this success is made of these ordinary moments, and people focus on these big grandiose moments, but it's kind of in the gaps, in the small moments where the good things are created, where success is created, and where ultimately failure is created as well, and bad decision making. So that was my favorite phrase. Did you have one, Jeremy?
Charlie, you had a thought on that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a quote that cements this. It's simple. It's how you do anything is how you do everything. So every tiny little ordinary moment really matters, you know, and like until we get the significance of that, we can't really think big because we won't be able to follow through small. And that'll be a big blocker. So like we might have this big vision, like Mark, you're, you know, jesting about not being able to make good decisions ever, but that's what happens. You know, you have this big picture, you see it, you want to get there, but you keep, you know, it's subterfuge, self-subterfuge. Like you keep getting in your own way because you're not acknowledging the little moments that lead up to that big picture. And I think that's it. It's so evident in that quote of just how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you want to get that thing, you've got to do every little thing leading up to it.
That's really, so you said, you know, think big, follow through small, I think is what you said right there, right? I think so. Where I land, where my head goes with this. So I'm a lacrosse coach. I coach high school lacrosse. I coach youth lacrosse on the boys side. And like small things make big things happen, right? And these ordinary moments are the small things, and the ordinary moments are basically scooping the ball into your stick. No matter like what I put together as this brilliant offense where people are cutting and picking and doing all these things, if we can't scoop the ball into our stick, we can't do any kind of offense, right? So there are those ordinary moments. And then the other thing where my coach's mind popped in is this idea of being in good position. And you talked about it, Charlie, earlier, being in good position. So just the reference of that is like, hey, you know, bad stuff's going to come our way, but if we're in good position to navigate the bad stuff, you know, defensive posture, angles, all of that kind of stuff, it's really translatable to multiple fields. I think what he's talking about.
Yeah, and position is a huge motif in the first part of this book, and I think it's almost underspoken, but some of the points that are made, like for example, you know, you could be the biggest idiot, but in a good position, you're perceived as a god compared to somebody who could be a god but is in a really bad position. And the exact example he gave is like a company who's got cash on the balance sheet and in a down economy, like where good potentials and opportunities are now great opportunities, and they're in a good position. Whereas on the other side of that, you could imagine there are no good decisions. There are no good opportunities. So position is everything, just like on the field, whether it be lacrosse or soccer or baseball, basketball, whatever.
I was thinking about that. I can't remember the words he uses, but idiots being in great positions and silly people not, and vice versa. And I was thinking of mem coins for some reason, and maybe, you know, a lot of people making a lot of money there who perhaps in another sphere wouldn't.
Yeah.
He speaks to this. So in the book, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So ego, we've spoken about ego, emotion, social defaults, and inertia. And I've been a victim of inertia just this week, in fact, well, the last 2 weeks, because it's been inertia. I can go on about that in a minute. But what did you think about social and the inertia default, Jeremy? What did they speak to you in any way? And
Yeah.
how they represent clear thinking or not?
Yeah, so the inertia default, we could definitely start there. So this idea that he says in the book there's an asymmetry to change, right? So when we try to make a change, or when we want to do something differently than we've done in the past, or do something that is outside and this is social norm kind of stuff too, doing something outside the accepted social norm. If you take a swing and you miss, the negative outcome of that resounds louder than if you swing and you hit a single, right? Or a double, right? And that's really interesting, right? Because that affects our willingness to push the change button, I think.
Yeah, I think too that when you create the space to not be influenced by social norms, that you actually will do things that put you in a better position, even if you don't realize it or know it. So like our compulsion to follow social norms is so strong. Peer pressure is so strong. But like I'm going to read an excerpt actually. Like, the social rewards for going with the crowd are felt long before the benefits of going against it are gained. One measure of a person is the degree to which they'll do the right thing when it goes against the popular belief. But that's how you cement this clear thinking, by not being reactive to the social constructs and norms and compulsion. And I think that for me, that's probably the most important thing out of the social default aspect of these 4 points, is just, know thyself, be true to thyself, all of the guru wisdom, spiritual teachings, etc. And don't compromise. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to react and do something that undermines yourself.
Do you have any day-to-day rules or strategies that you use to prevent yourself falling victim to it?
Yeah, I kind of. You ever been to Austin, Texas?
I haven't, no.
Yep.
So Austin's slogan is "Stay Weird, Austin." And
has it always been that, or is that a new slogan?
It's been around for a bit.
Yeah, it's been around for a bit, ever since I've been going there. But honestly, that's it, man. Just be fucking weird. Like, embrace it. Don't worry so much about it. Don't let ego drive you to try to fit in and do things that others are doing so that you can be normal. Like, could you imagine life on Earth if every one of us embraced our unique talents and abilities? Like, just do that. Be that.
Yeah,
And that's it.
Yeah.
No, 100% agree. I think one of the things is to like, for folks like us who are clearly okay with doing that, we need to like enable courage in folks that don't, by saying, hey, this is your reason for not doing that is not a manufacturer defect. It's like a biological construct. So going back to what he talks about on these default modes, or on these default network kind of things, is like, if we had a community, right? If Charlie and I started a community, back in, we're hunting and foraging, right? And to be in our community, you have to have a beard. You just have to. And then, Mark comes, to the community. We have this great house. We have this, a bunch of like bacon that's salted and saved. We got, we figured out how to play some music. We sing and we read. And Mark, you've been on the road for like 2 years. You're famished. You're scared. You've been fending off wolves, and you come in, we're like, hey dude, we'd love to have you, but you got to grow a beard. That's
for anyone who's listening to this on Spotify, Jeremy and Charlie both have incredible beards, and I don't. Just so you know.
Fair enough. But that's like some real shit right there, right? That's like some real shit.
Yeah, one of the other quotes. So I cheated. I've listened to the audiobook of this book a couple times, and I've also read through the print version. And I highlighted. I took a copy of the print version. I just highlighted my favorite passages. But one of the quotes he says is, "Doing something different means you might underperform, but it also means you might change the game entirely." So if you allow the kind of automatic social behaviors of your biology to get in the way, you'll never do that different thing. You'll be afraid to underperform. You'll be afraid to not fit in, right? And then you never realize your potential without that space for clear thinking. So you got to stop yourself. You got to not be it's really overcoming fear at that point, because it's so strong. It's like the fear of public speaking, why so many people avoid this kind of an interaction, right? But if you can think clearly, then more than likely you'll step in and do it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Following on from that, I'll read one of my quotes. Inertia also prevents us from doing hard things. The longer we avoid the hard thing we know we should do, the harder it becomes to do. I think we've all experienced this, where you put something off, it becomes harder and more difficult, and it kind of grows into this big specter of doom, and I'm not going to do it. And I little steps, is that like when something if a project becomes so daunting and becomes so big, so for me, like, I'm writing screenplays at the moment, trying to research the craft, and when you think about the whole thing, it's like, oh my god, I can't do that. But when you think about, okay, I have to do 500 words a day, and you break it down into little chunks, into little pieces, which are, maybe that's one way to fight the dread of inertia. I don't know, Jeremy, how do you, when you come to a project and you're just stumped by it, and you must have had this in your music career, like, how do you break through that inertia?
If it's a domain that I haven't messed with, or like there's an element of the project that I've never been involved in, I go deep into it and try to figure out, okay, where are the gaps, and what is missing, but also what ties together to my expertise that could be lit up, right? Because if you can tie it back, if you can ground it in something you're already excited about, then it's like, holy cow, then you just jump right in. But that's like a activation of this curiosity engine kind of thing. Not sure if I answered your question there. More of a riffing.
I'm not sure I asked a very coherent question, but I liked your response. Yeah. So one of the, maybe we could, like, summary of part one. One of the things I've written down here, and you can, I don't know who wrote who said, give me a lever big enough and I can move the world. Who said that? Who said that originally? Was that Falcao or some? I don't know.
I don't know. It's a good one though.
And I've written, clear thinking is a lever. Give me a big enough lever and I can move my world. And so clear thinking is the key to success or better decisions in every walk, every domain of life. And it's something which we need to study to be better at. We need to read books like this to be better at. Any final thoughts on the intro for you, Jeremy? Charlie?
Yeah, just real quick on my side, the takeaway here is acknowledgement of the defaults and learning how to manage them to where they don't dig you into a massive hole. And more importantly, you don't waste energy trying to move within those. One of those, not to go deep into this rabbit hole, but the idea of feeling right versus being right, right? And are you wasting a massive amount of energy proving that you're right, even though you may not be right? So it's all about managing defaults. It's all about applying your energy to the things that matter the most, and to identify what the things that matter the most, you have to think clearly, right? So that's what I got out of chapter 1, or out of part 1.
Yeah, and this dovetails nicely into that last Inertia Default, which is a line from his book. Starting something is hard, but so too is stopping something. So, the first key is awareness. Reading a book like this and being like, oh wow, yeah, I do that. I'm programmed like that. I didn't even think about it. And some people are at that level where they're not even aware, they're not cognizant. So becoming aware is great, but then you got to do something, because stopping what you've been doing your entire life is no small feat. So you have to practice. And I think that like, I mean, I've been at points in my life where I have been clear thinking. I have stopped all my inhibitions and my behaviors from biology. Like, I've been the top of the mountain, if you will, for an analogy. The problem is that it doesn't stick. It's a practice. It's something that you never can stop doing because it'll always crop up. It'll always come back. Ego will find a way in. Like I mentioned before, people who you would think are egoless or who act egoless, they're probably the most ego driven out of everybody you know. It's a very difficult process. So don't think that you can attain it or reach it or grab it and then you have it. It's something you need to constantly do every single day. Create the space. Ask yourself, can I be making a better decision here? Am I responding or am I reacting to my biological programming? Do I need to apply some thinking here to come up with a better way forward? And that's what a part one is all about, is understanding those biological programming and also understanding that you can reprogram. It takes time and it's a practice.
I like that. You can, but it's a practice. So you can do it, but there's an investment and it's going to take work. It's not just going to happen.
Speaking of practice, a great quote that we definitely need to highlight. Shane Parrish, thanks for encouraging people to join a book club. Quote, if you want to read more, join a book club. I'm going to add on that, join our book club, because you get to unpack what you read together with brilliant minds like Charlie Graham.
Yeah. And if you want to, on YouTube, Spotify, our previous book clubs, The Nexus, the new convergence of art, technology, and science. That's 8 episodes on YouTube and Spotify. The design of everyday things, UX in the Web3 world.
And my random red book that no one knows what it is because I took the
why don't you like covers on books, Jake?
It wears me out, dude. Just like you open it and it like flops around and it's noisy and like you move it and it slides up and down. It's just massively distracting for me. I've got issues,
one of those
Mark.
old bookcases, like, because don't judge a book by its cover is from the time when all books had the same cover. It's not a modern expression, but and you want one of those old bookcases where all your books are brown and green.
That's right.
I like it. Okay.
Well, amazing.
Awesome.
Charlie, thanks for joining us. Look forward to unpacking future chapters together. And yeah, this has been great. Mark, tell them where they could find all this stuff and join us for the next one.
Thinkingonpaper.xyz. You got the links to, we're on YouTube, Spotify. We're on all those channels. Come and join us at your preferred location and read some books with us. Expand your thinking with us. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys. This was enjoyable. Cheers.
Thanks, Charlie.